Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about vehicle leasing and what it actually means. If you stay through the whole video, you will learn some inside information about how the leasing process works and whether it's the right choice for you. Like always, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my videos and let me know what you think about this video in the comments. All right, let's get into this. What does leasing a vehicle mean? So in basic terms, in a lease, you agree to rent the vehicle for a set number of months. During this time, you are making payments towards a portion of the entire balance, not the full balance. At the end of your lease agreement, you will have three options. One, return the vehicle and walk away, which is always a really good option if you like to trade in vehicles every 2 to 3 years. Two, you can trade in for a different vehicle without any negative equity. Of course, this is assuming you stay within the miles allowed and there is no excessive wear and tear to the vehicle. Or three, you can refinance the remaining balance. Remember, you haven't paid the entire vehicle off at the end of your lease. All you have done is paid off the depreciation part of the vehicle. Now that's very important, the word depreciation. So some of the leasing terms that you're going to come across whenever you go attempt to lease a vehicle is something called residual and depreciation. And I wanted to clarify what these two words mean so that way you have a better understanding and have all the information you need whenever you go into a type of contract like a lease. So residual balance. When they talk to you about a residual balance at the end of your lease, this means this is the trade-in value at the end of your lease that the finance company has calculated on the vehicle you are leasing. This balance is primarily dependent on the vehicle and the length of contract. So, what this is basically trying to say here is your vehicle is going to be worth a certain amount of money at the end of your lease. That is what is known as the residual balance. Residual meaning what's left over. Now they're also going to talk to you about depreciation. What depreciation means in leasing terms is how much your vehicle will depreciate or lose its value. The depreciation varies depending on the vehicle and the term of the contract. A vehicle with a high depreciation will have a higher payment compared to a vehicle with a low depreciation. And a tip on leasing, if you're looking for the best bang for your buck, you want to look for a vehicle to lease that has very low depreciation. This will help keep your payments low. Now, interest rates are a whole other story during a lease. Interest rates can depend on the finance company. Companies like Jeep will look for outside financing. These types of companies have high interest rates. When you compare it to companies like Toyota, who typically leases their own vehicles, their interest rates usually hover around 1% or even less than that. Ultimately, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to pay the depreciation part of your vehicle plus any interest that's attached to it. So if you go to, let's say in this example, Jeep, and you have a $5,000 depreciation, you're not only going to pay $5,000 to have that vehicle leased, but you're also going to pay the interest on top of that. If you go to Toyota and have a vehicle that has $5,000 depreciation, your payments would look very different because with Jeep, they will charge you more interest compared to like if you were to go with a company like Toyota. I wanted to show you a real world example of what a lease agreement might look like. Just to keep in mind, whenever you do lease agreements, you have the option to go 12, 24, 36, 39. They have all these different lengths of terms agreements. So depending on the length of the term, that will depend on how much depreciation your vehicle is going to have and how much you're going to owe because of the distance in the terms. So in this agreement, we're assuming that you went into the car dealership and you agreed that the vehicle's total value was $60,000. That includes tax, title, and license, everything included. $60,000 was agreed upon value for the entire vehicle. But remember, you're not going to pay the $60,000 in the lease. You're only going to pay the depreciation part of the $60,000. So let's see what residual looks like for a vehicle at $60,000. Again, this all depends on what vehicle you go into an agreement with. A vehicle that has a higher depreciation, their numbers are going to look something like how I'm going to show you. A vehicle that has lower depreciation, meaning it doesn't lose its value as much, might have numbers a little bit different, a little bit smaller. But in this instance, we're assuming it's a standard $60,000 with a typical to above average depreciation value. Right? So if you decide to go on a 12-month lease, meaning I'm only going to have this vehicle for 12 months, and we assume that in those 12 months, it's going to depreciate $12,000, your residual value at that time would be $48,000 for that vehicle. When you add the $48,000, which residual means the leftover, plus the $12,000 that depreciated, that $48,000 is what you would either refinance or you would trade in the vehicle without having any upside down. Let's assume the same vehicle at 24 months has a residual value, leftover value of $39,000. All right, so in this illustration, it depreciated $21,000, which means at the end of 24 months, if you want to keep this vehicle, you would have to refinance the $39,000. This $39,000 is also what the finance company is assuming your vehicle is going to be worth at the end of your lease. And let's say you go to 36 months. By this time, your vehicle's residual value would be at $32,000, meaning there was a depreciation of $28,000. So at this point, after 36 months, you could either trade in the vehicle or you could refinance the $32,000 and then continue paying for this vehicle. Now, assuming that this lease, now this assumption here is assuming you go to a lease, let's say through Toyota, and I'm not saying Toyota is the only company that offers a less than 1%, but assuming it's through Toyota and your interest rate was at a 1%, this is what your monthly payments would look like for this type of scenario. Again, we go back to the vehicle lease agreement amount is $60,000. The residual value, we said that after 12 months, it would be at $48,000, which is the leftover balance that you would still have to pay. If you finance those $12,000 at 1%, your payment would be about $921 a month. This is paying off $12,000 at a 1% at 12 months. If you say, you know what, give me my options for, say, 24 months. And if you remember the illustration, at 24 months, the residual value was going to be $39,000. So at this time, you would finance $21,000, which is the depreciation of the vehicle at 1%. Your payment would be about $884. And let's look at it at 36 months. If you go at 36 months, now your residual value is $32,000, which is the leftover amount of the value of the vehicle. If you finance the $28,000, because 32 plus 28 equals 60, at 1%, your payment is looking to be about $789. So these are the term contracts, or these are the term options they will give you. The longer you keep the lease, the more they can spread out the depreciation, and the lower your payment will be. So whenever they bring you this contract and they offer you these payments, the very first question you should ask is, well, what is the residual value of this vehicle? Because you want to know at the end of the contract, how much am I still going to owe on this vehicle if I decide to keep it? So why lease instead of purchase? There's a couple of different main reasons why somebody would lease instead of purchase a vehicle. Payments are typically lower on a lease than on a purchase, since you're only paying for the depreciation of the vehicle or the loss in value instead of the entire purchase price. Higher depreciation equals higher payments, and lower depreciation equals lower payments. I mean, this is just very common sense type of thinking. If a vehicle that you go into has $5,000 depreciation and they're going to allow you to pay that within 24 months, well, you kind of divide those $5,000 into 24 months plus any interest. But if that same vehicle has $15,000 depreciation, now in those 24 months, you're going to have to cover those $15,000 plus any interest. So yes, your payment does depend on how much of a depreciation the vehicle is going to have. Always want to look for vehicles that have very low depreciation if you want to keep your payments low. Another reason why you want to lease instead of purchase is if you are the type to trade in your vehicles every couple of years. A lease would allow you to trade in without being upside down. Now, upside down is a very negative term whenever you go trade in your vehicles, because this means if you go into a deal and you have a vehicle you're trading in that is upside down, that means that you owe more on the vehicle than what the vehicle is worth. This is also known as negative equity. Now, you can still trade it in. Let's assume you do have a regular purchase and you're trading it in. You owe 20, but the vehicle is only valued at, let's say, 12,000. There's an $8,000 difference. So you can still trade it in. At that time, you would either have to pay the 8,000 up front if you don't want to roll it in, or you can roll it into your new deal. So instead of financing your new vehicle at 30,000, now you're adding 8,000 more because of the negative equities. Also, one other thing, if you lease a vehicle, this also in a way helps your credit, because a finance company will only report the amount you owe on your lease agreement and not the entire purchase price of the vehicle. This is something that I learned just recently. So in our previous or in our illustration, the vehicle's worth was 60,000. If you elected to go into a 1-year lease on it, your depreciation is going to be 12,000. So when it is reported to your credit reporting agencies, they don't report 60,000 as how much you have in debt. They only report the 12, because that's really the only thing you're responsible for. So if you're looking to help your credit out in regards to your debt to income, this is another great way to kind of help that out. Thank you for watching. I hope this kind of gives you a little bit more of a better understanding on what a lease means. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. But once again, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.